So let's back up some and talk about the basics of cartography, the visual variables. The visual variables are the very basics of cartography. These are the marks that make up maps. Jacques Bertin, in the late 1960s, argued that all maps can be whittled down to these individual lines and marks that are made on a piece of paper to make a map. He called these the graphic variables. The field of cartography has expanded these, and generally it is agreed upon that these are the visual variables. The graphic from a well-used textbook here in this slide divides these into qualitative and quantitative visual variables. The ones on the left are those which are best for nominal and categorical data, while the visual variables on the right are those that are good with quantitative data, such as ordinal, interval, or ratio data, data that's represented either by numbers or by some sort of order, such as good, better, or best. Often when I talk about the visual variables, students get really caught up on color. But I first want to start out with all of the other visual variables besides color. There's actually a lot of work to work with here if you say needed to make a map that was only grayscale because it needed to be printed. Let's go through each of these individually. Orientation is often used when you're constrained to pure black and white, no grayscale. And it's occasionally used with another variable. Here, for instance, orientation is used as the second variable to show which states were flipped from the previous election, not just who won the Electoral College votes for the state. So here, Pennsylvania flipped from a red state last election to a blue state this election, and this map maker has added this hatching to indicate that there's something else that has happened here. Now let's move on to shape. Shape is often used to designate why one point is different than another. In this map of Oregon, we can see that Salem is shown as a star to designate it as the capital. This is different from how Eugene and Springfield, Corvallis, and Albany are shown with just dots. And here on a Google map, the general shape of the pin is the same, but the shapes inside the pins are different to tell you what they are. Coffee shops are represented by a coffee cup. Restaurants are shown with a fork and knife. And the library is represented by a book shape. Arrangement is often used to show different types of roads or trails, for instance. Here on this map, we have trails for different reasons. This might be a four-wheel drive road here, while this type of trail might be only for pedestrians. This trail might allow bikes, and this might be an area where you have to be, you have to walk your bike or something like that. So these first three that we just talked about, we can tell that we're talking about categories of data, types of vehicles you can use, types of activities that you can do on those trails, whether something is a restaurant, bar, or library, and whether a state flipped party for who they're supporting. Now let's move on to the quantitative visual variables. These are used when you have some sort of order to your data, whether it's just an order or actually a quantitative difference, aka a numerical difference. Spacing First off, is good when you have an order to your data. I'm not sure what this map represents, but it's using spacing to show more of whatever the data is. Here we can see that around Paris, there's a darker color, and the spacing is decreased as we get to areas where there's more of whatever we're mapping. Whether it's a high rate of disease in this map or a higher density of people, without even grayscale, you can start to see the patterns. Here are areas of high likelihood or frequency of whatever variable that is. And we can see that the spacing of those lines gets less and less. Size is a very common visual variable, and it's used on a particular type of map called a proportional symbol map. Here, it's easy to see which counties have the largest numbers of people by looking for the largest squares. Here we can see like LA County probably has the most amount of people in that county, while places out in Wyoming and eastern Montana have very few people and very small squares. Again, this is called a proportional symbol map. This map also uses size to show different hierarchies of rivers. So we can see that here is the largest river, while here are just small little tributaries. And all of that is done with size as the visual variable. Finally, perspective height isn't super common, but it makes for a pretty cool map. Here, this map shows distribution of AIDS cases in the US in 1988. And you can easily see where there are kind of peaks in this data and where it's not very common. We can even make beautiful monochromatic maps by just using the non-color visual variables. Here, this map on the right uses spacing to show the difference between different types of borders.